Have the different flavors of Mountain Dew been a sign that something terrible is going to happen? Are they trying to warn us, or is it all just a coincidence? Follow me down the rabbit hole to find out. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the rabbit hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we are talking about the Mountain Dew conspiracy. So thank you, Kelly, Christy, Brooke, and Paul for requesting this episode. If you like Mountain Dew or are an avid Mountain Dew drinker, this episode might ruin it for you. So if that's you, maybe don't listen. That's okay. I get it. And of course, before we get started, I love to thank our sponsors. So thank you, Wise Wolf Gold, for sponsoring my podcast. Guys, if you want gold and silver delivered straight to your front door for as little as $50 a month, it's a subscription. So it comes every single month. You go to rabbithole.gold right now. You can subscribe. You can get a higher tier subscription as well, if that's something that you're into. But for as little as $50 a month, that's basically unheard of anywhere else. So check it out. But let's dive in. The original formula for Mountain Dew was invented in Tennessee in the 1940s by beverage bottlers Barney and Ollie Hartman. They just really needed a mixer for their liquor. And at the time, soft drinks were sold regionally, but the Hartmans had a hard time getting the soft drinks they liked in Knoxville, which they did get in Georgia where they used to live, so they needed to develop their own. They wanted something that would mix well with whiskey, and Mountain Dew was used as a slang term for whiskey at the time, or like a slang term for moonshine. Specifically, like Highland Scotch whiskey was what they would use Mountain Dew as the term for. It was Southern and or like Scots Irish for moonshine, basically. And it was even referenced in the Irish folk song, The Rare Old Mountain Dew, which dates back to 1882. But the new Mountain Dew was trademarked for the soft drink in 1948. They wanted to sell their drink in local stores, but no one was really buying it. They were branded basically a standalone drink, calling it the Appalachian Thirst Quencher. The brothers hit the road trying to get more people interested in their drink. So they would go to different conferences and like basically just travel around the region trying to sell their drink, but it just wasn't as popular as the other options. On a train one day, the Hartman brothers met Charles Gordon, who had partnered with William Swartz to bottle Dr. Enough, and offered him a sample of their soda. They're like, hey man, like, try this. You might like it. Charles did like it, and he made a deal with the brothers to bottle their drink at the Tri-Cities Beverage Corporation in Johnson City, Tennessee. In 1961, the Tip Corporation of Marion, Virginia, bought the rights to Mountain Dew for only $6.95. How did they manage that? So I think, this is my assumption, I think the brothers were basically like tired of trying to sell their soda to no avail. So they told the guys at Tip Corporation, buy us dinner and you can have our drink. It's yours. No strings attached. And then the dinner was only $6.95. So it was theirs. The Tip Corporation revised the flavor by adding lemonade to it, and then they relaunched the drink. By 1964, PepsiCo had purchased Tip Corporation and subsequently the rights to Mountain Dew. They changed the logo on the drink, with the original logo having like cartoon figures, and it had things like "it'll tickle your innards" as the slogan, as well as like a hillbilly looking guy with a jug and a cork flying out like through the hat of the hillbilly. So all in all, PepsiCo was like, let's do something different. In 1969, it changed to like a big retro block letters that spelled out Mountain Dew, and basically has kind of stayed some version of that until now. The different flavors have different logos, but they all have the Mountain Dew logo. Sometimes they spell out Mountain, other times they just put MTN, but basically you're seeing the same logo since the 1960s to now. In 1974, Pepsi added orange flavoring to the drink and an electric green coloring. In the 1970s, Mountain Dew was trying to brand itself as the go-to drink for extreme sports. I don't know about you guys, but when I think about extreme sports now, I think Red Bull. I don't think Mountain Dew. And I think that they kind of felt this too, so later they would change it up. But in 2004, they started doing exclusive flavors for different companies. So most notably, the Baja Blast for Taco Bell, because that's the only place that you could get the Baja Blast. In 2007, they decided to lean away from extreme sports and lean more into gamers. They started dropping flavors that coincided with game releases and with the names that would entice gamers, like Voltage and like Whiteout and things like that, that went with the games that they were playing at the time, like the hottest game of the time. They continued their push toward gamers in 2014 when they teamed up with Dorito to launch a Dorito-flavored Mountain Dew drink called Dewitos. It didn't launch well, but in 2020, they basically did the opposite. So Dorito made a Mountain Dew flavored chip, and that actually did a lot better, although some people hate it. A lot of people like it more than the Dorito flavored Mountain Dew drink. So the conspiracies is basically like that every new flavor they release coincides with a major tragedy or disaster. Now, the theory doesn't work for every flavor they have released, but it works enough that when a new flavor of Mountain Dew is announced, it makes people pay attention. But also, while I was doing my research, it's not always when a new flavor is launched. Sometimes it's when a flavor goes away as well, which we'll get into with the Pitch Black, because a lot of the theories, when you're reading online or you're watching the videos online of the different Mountain Dew theories, they say things that aren't always 100% true. So I went into like when things are launched and the massive attacks that are happening at that same time. And I really dug into like the timeline behind it versus just like taking everybody's word on the internet to heart. But when they start advertising a new flavor heavily, or they re-release an old popular flavor, that's when most people start to pay attention. Something is likely going to happen then. So in May of 2001, Mountain Dew Code Red, which is a cherry flavor, was released to stores. This was the first different flavored Mountain Dew that they released. And it was super successful. I mean, it became a permanent flavor. You can still get Code Red now. Just 4 months after the release of Code Red, the attacks on 9/11 happened. Almost 3,000 people died. It's assumed that they named it this because, I mean, this was a pretty serious situation. It was a Code Red situation. It was one of only a few major attacks on U.S. soil throughout its history. Pitch Black is a flavor that we keep seeing. So it was first released as a limited Halloween series in 2004. And then after that first release, it had several limited time releases following the initial, before eventually becoming basically like a semi-permanent flavor until about 2021. That's when the flavor disappeared from stores, before returning briefly in January of 2023, and then again from October 24 to June 2025. This flavor, which is grape, was only available at 7-Eleven, Speedway, and Stripes gas stations. Oddly enough, in 2021, when the flavor was discontinued temporarily, we saw a massive pipeline ransomware attack. The Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack disrupted fuel supply across the southeastern United States. This led to widespread shortages. It was a huge deal. The breach was due to a compromised password, is what they say, and the company paid a $4.4 million ransom to restore operations. This attack was identified by the FBI as the work of a ransom as a service group called DarkSide. It was one of the most significant cyber attacks in the United States. Some people also point to the CrowdStrike outage as related to this same flavor, which is what you'll see when you watch other videos about this conspiracy. In 2021, it was discontinued and the pipeline ransom happened. The flavor came back in October of 2024, and just a few months prior to that, there was an IT outage in July of 2024. The cybersecurity company CrowdStrike distributed faulty updates to its Falcon sensor security software that caused issues with Microsoft Windows computers running the software. Roughly 8.5 million systems crashed and were completely unable to restart properly. This has been called the largest outage in the history of information technology. The worldwide financial damage has been estimated to be at least $10 billion. But it happened just a few months before Pitch Black came out. Mountain Dew Maui Burst was released exclusively in Dollar General stores in October 2019. This one is the one that I see misrepresented the most. So this flavor was supposed to run for a limited time, but became a permanent flavor in February of 2020. Some people point to this and say it tells that Maui was supposed to catch fire. Maui didn't actually catch fire until 2023. So if the flavor came out in 2019 and then became a permanent flavor in 2020, the timeline doesn't add up. That's the three-year discrepancy. Some people think that maybe the fire was actually supposed to start in 2020, but because of COVID and because of the lockdowns, they didn't want to start this fire when a lot of people would be home to die in their homes. And so they wanted to start the fire when people would be out and about and more likely to be able to get out of the area. Ideally, right? Like that's the warm and fuzzy idea. And like I said, a lot of videos I watched in this theory stated that Maui Burst came out only 3 months prior to the fires, but that isn't true. I looked into when it was released. It was released in 2019. The fire happened in 2023. A limited summer dew came out in 2024 called Mountain Dew Star Spangled Splash. It was a berry-flavored dew. And in May of 2024, the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed after a container ship ran into it. Francis Scott Key was the author of the poem that became the national anthem, The Star Spangled Banner. The flavor was supposed to be re-released this year, but it was scrapped. I'm not sure if it was scrapped due to the conspiracies. Like, maybe? I don't know. But Star Spangled Splash isn't the only flavor that came out in 2024. Infinite Swirl came out as another flavor later in the year. Then, during hurricane season, we had some of the wildest hurricanes, specifically Hurricane Helene, that wiped out many towns in North Carolina, of all places. And I know I did a whole episode on this, but it's just so weird to me that you have this hurricane in a place that hurricanes don't hit. It's very odd. Anyway, as far as we know now, the death toll from that hurricane is somewhere around 250 people. They are still working to rebuild after the massive damage that was done by that hurricane in September of 2024. An Infinite Swirl looked like a hurricane. It was the deadliest hurricane to strike mainland U.S. since Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Mountain Dew has another flavor called Purple Thunder. It's a blackberry and plum flavor sold in Circle K and Kroger stores. It came out in 2022 and is still available now. Well, Israel Defense Forces have an experimental active protection system called Purple Thunder. How odd. It was designed to detect incoming anti-tank guided missiles. They tested this technology in the southern Lebanon security strip in the late 90s. And the point was to have a missile fired at them so they could see if the tech worked. It did work sometimes, but not in every instance. I mean, like during the day, they could see missiles coming. So that was like the time they were trying to test it the most, because if a missile's coming and the equipment doesn't work, they can still respond to that missile and not die, ideally. This flavor release and the now declassified Israeli Ministry of Defense mission don't correlate via timestamps, but the name makes you think a bit, because the mission took place in the late 90s, but the mission was declassified in 2020, and the flavor didn't come out until 2022. So it makes you wonder, like, did they put the name Purple Thunder on this Mountain Dew to, one, make you look into classified documentation? Probably not. They're probably trying to hide the classified documentation, kind of like they're doing with, or like it's declassified now, but kind of like they do with Disney's Frozen. Like everyone was looking up, like, did Disney freeze his head? But then they came out with Disney's Frozen, so when you Google that, that's what pops up, not did Walt Disney freeze his head. Makes you wonder, if you Google Purple Thunder, does Mountain Dew pop up instead of this secret defense mission? More recently, people are paying attention to the flavor that was announced in a live press conference called Baja Midnight. Interestingly, the U.S. surprise attack on Iran was called Operation Midnight Hammer. This was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history. And in Spanish, usually Baja means low, but it can also translate to person who dies while performing his or her duties, which I thought was interesting for this Operation Midnight Strike, which was executed at midnight and killed people in Iran. It's weird. But you know what really shook me? This was wild because I don't think these guys actually meant to make this correlation, and I don't think anybody would make the correlation if these guys didn't say something. So I was watching a YouTube video on this theory, as I do. The Makeshift Project had made this, it was like a clip, it was a short that I watched of theirs, and they were kind of going back and forth about the conspiracy, and they were kind of laughing about it, which most people are laughing about it when they're talking about this conspiracy. And the one guy was telling the other guy all the flavors and the tragedies, just like I laid out for you just now. So they're kind of going back and forth. They're like, here's the Mountain Dew conspiracy. The guy listening to the theory looked up what new flavors were coming out. At the beginning of May, they dropped the flavor Mango Rush, but only at Little Caesars restaurants. And the first guy said, did you look up where the most Little Caesars are? And the second guy was like, no, but we saw one in Houston. And I was assuming like maybe they had just been to Houston and they had seen a Little Caesars out there, which they're all over the country, right? So whatever. But then the one guy goes, so you think there'll be a flood in Houston? And I was like, whoa, wait a second. There was just a massive flood in Texas. So I looked it up. The city with the most Little Caesars is, in fact, Houston, Texas. And the floods were actually closer to San Antonio than Houston. And even then, they were about an hour outside of San Antonio. But how weird that they had that conversation when they were talking about the Mountain Dew conspiracy. And I was like, do you think that they even know that, like, that's what happened? I should write to them and be like, guys, you predicted it perfectly right on the money. Because it was wild. Anyway, outside of the, like, flavors and the conspiracy about the flavors, Mountain Dew is just disgusting. And it doesn't have to do with, like, just how bad it is for you, which, like, I'm not a huge Mountain Dew fan, so I'm a little biased against it. But for years, people have believed that the food coloring, like the yellow coloring that's in the drinks, actually causes low sperm count. And they, people always joke about it. If you drink Mountain Dew, you can't have babies. Although the experts say that that is false. Like, officially, that's not true. Unofficially, could be true. But people are posting all over TikTok about finding floating debris in their soda. One lady showed every 2 liter in the store that she was in, they had floaters in them, like in the bottom. And they would float to the bottom, and then when she, shook it, like the floaters would go away, and then they'd float back to the bottom. But it makes you wonder, like, what is floating in the soda? I'm not really sure, but I do know that Mountain Dew isn't supposed to have things floating in it. And then, what's really interesting is in 2009, a man opened a Mountain Dew, he poured it into a cup, and when he went to drink out of it, he claims that there was a mouse in it. Or, I guess, like, what remained of a mouse, because it had to pour out of a can and into a cup, so a full mouse probably couldn't get through that little opening, right? So he decided, I'm going to sue Pepsi because of this. He wanted, like, $50,000 in damages, which, honestly, you could have gotten more, but not a big deal. But the beverage giant wasn't, like, they weren't going down without a fight. They were like, I don't know, something smells a little fishy about this. So they brought in an expert to run some tests about this mouse situation. The experts found that a mouse would completely dissolve in 45 days in the soda due to the citric acid. Based on the manufacturer date, the mouse literally still wouldn't even be whole in that can, or even be partially whole. It would have been completely gone based on the manufacturer date, the day the guy said he drank the soda, and the fact that the mouse would dissolve in 45 days. So this ended up getting the case thrown out. But this story gives me even more pause when we think about what might be floating in the bottom of the bottles on the shelves in stores. Because if a whole mouse would dissolve in 45 days, what could it possibly be that's floating in these bottles? Like, this is wild. Also, if it can do that to a mouse, just imagine what Mountain Dew is doing to the inside of your body. Which is where I kind of come back to that sperm thing. And they point it to, like, the color. They're like, the coloring is what's going to cause you to have low sperm. Like, I don't know. I mean, there's so many, like, weird ingredients in this soda. It could be any number of things that causes you to have issues. So, Anyway, this episode was a little bit shorter because there wasn't a lot about it. I mean, not every single they have dropped a lot of flavors. I did notice that no Mountain Dew like Kickstart flavor coincides with like tragedies, and no energy drinks. The Kickstart is the energy drink. No of the hard, like the Mountain Dew hard stuff, which is the alcoholic Mountain Dew. None of that. It's just like Mountain Dew soda, and it can be an exclusive flavor or not an exclusive flavor, but it has to be the actual soda and not like a different line. So yeah, that's what I have for you for Mountain Dew. I would love to know what you think about this. If you think that it holds some weight or if it doesn't. In my Patreon, I will be sharing my opinions about this one. And I actually have some pretty strong opinions about this conspiracy. So if you want to hear about that, it'll be out in August, because in August, I will cover all of my opinions about the episodes I've covered in July. And also, I have a new tier launching. So if you want update episodes about conspiracies I've already covered, I will be doing that on my next tier of Patreon. So you get the episodes a week early, ad-free. You get an opinion episode. We're going to do hangouts. We're going to do voting on your next update episode, and you're going to get update episodes over on Patreon. So go check it out. Guys, until next week, stay skeptical, and I will see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Balaha, for our awesome intro.